Okay, we are recording to the cloud, and also we're live on the village's Facebook page at the moment. Okay.
Good evening.
Hi, Ed. We're all here. We're just waiting to get started in 1 minute.
Okay, I'll go back on mute.
Okay. Okay. Wave if you can hear me. All right. So just a few logistics here regarding the meeting. I'm actually going to share my screen again where I had those details. This is Todd Schmidt, by the way, Village Administrator talking. I'm just going to get through some logistics and then turn it over. So for those in the public who are attending, you're going to be automatically muted. There's no public comments that are going to be heard during this meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the village's YouTube channel for viewing in the future. So those of you participating as commission members or presenters, you're all muted automatically, and you should stay muted unless you need to participate. The chairperson will call on people individually for comment as we make our way through agenda items. So if you don't have a comment, that's fine. Just indicate no comment when you're called on. And then all votes will be taken by roll call. Tracy, that's your task. Be sure to unmute to respond to the roll call. And with that, I will turn it over to the village president and Tracy to get the meeting started.
I'm going to call this Plan Commission meeting for April 13th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please. You have to unmute.
Chris Zellner,
Here.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Here.
Kristen Runge,
Here.
Brad Zeman,
Here.
Brian Malish,
Here.
Chris Thomas,
Here.
Brian Wallace.
Here.
Okay, the first item we have on the agenda for this evening is our minutes from March 9th, 2020. I'd look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second. Motion by Chris Thomas, second by Brad Zeman. Tracy, roll call vote, please.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, our first item under new business is discuss and take action on Phase 1 Final Plat Specific Implementation Plan, BH Heritage Hills LLC, corner of State Highway 113 and North Division Street, AKA the Brynick property. Todd or Kevin?
That'd be me, Chris. Chris, just as a quick introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to the group from Meridian. So in the packet was the phase 1 of the final plat. So the preliminary plat's been approved. This is the first phase of the development. So this is considered phase 1 final plat. So the final plat is only for a portion of the preliminary plat that was approved. So tonight, after a presentation by the Meridian group, the village staff is in a position to recommend a couple of different motions by the Plan Commission. The first one is a recommendation to the village board for approval of the final plat. And then secondly, the action you'll be taking is, or if appropriate, will be a motion to approve the SIP for the project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Munson, and he's going to interact with a couple of different parts of his team.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Again, Brian Munson here with Chris Ellers and Dan Day. And what we're going to do is we will share a quick slideshow. We're glad to be back tonight to talk about the first step of implementing the Heritage Hills, of course, in front of this body late last year and the Common Council over the span of January. So with that, why don't I share my screen here? We can get this up and running. Oops. If I can get the right one to show up here. Nope. Let's try one more time here. Too many windows open. Okay, can everybody see the slideshow?
Yes. Okay.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for having us again here tonight and for conducting your meeting. Quick introductions. I was Brian Munson, who's been planner on this project. Also with us is Dan Day, the head engineer on this project, and then myself with Viridian. Lots changed, and it hasn't changed since the last time we saw you all. The project itself hasn't changed, and the plat itself hasn't changed. The layout hasn't changed. But there are some obviously economic conditions that have changed, but I want to talk through those a little bit, and I'll give you a quick update on where, how that's affecting us and how we forecast on moving forward here. First, though, I want to just say that, again, this first phase really is directed at two consumer groups, and we've really based this off of the Housing Task Force study that you conducted. And I wanted to give you a few reminders and facts that came from this that helped us develop really the two types of product that you'll see in this first phase. The first is the entry-level housing. This is meant for first-time home buyers. What we really recognized was that some of these facts that jumped out at us is that only about 10 or 11% of all people in Waunakee actually work and live in Waunakee. The top three employment categories in Waunakee are manufacturing, construction, and education. And the average annual income for manufacturing is about $39,000. For construction is about $54,000, and education is just over $50,000. It also states that a house priced at $308,000 would be considered affordable for a household of four earning 100% of the median income. So that's really our target point, is to come in and deliver a good portion of these houses will be priced at $308,000 or less. Hopefully starting in we're in the mid to upper mid 200s, but we will definitely have plenty of products starting in the 200s in this phase to target this entry level buyer group. Next slide, Brian. The missing middle, that's your first time move up buyer or still someone who's looking to purchase a house in Waunakee and has been priced out. The median income in Waunakee is of the missing middle was $123,000 in 2017. A total of 216 slide here. A total of 216 middle income households defined as those earning 80 to 100% of the area median income. So either 78,000 to 98,000 would need to be added in order to fill this current missing middle gap. So that right there tells us there's a definite demand for this this price point or this product, and that's why we're excited to try and bring on as much as possible in this first phase. And then finally, a family earning 80 to 100% of the area median income would be able to afford any of these houses that we build in this first phase. So all of the houses that we are producing in this first phase will be affordable by the missing middle buyer group or demographic per se that's been labeled in Waunakee. Finally, the last slide that I'll share with you before Brian just quick gives you an overview on the project. Where do we stand today? Where does housing stand today? And being Viridian and being one of the biggest home builder in the state, we can kind of give you an inside view of what the numbers are looking like. I broke it up to pre-coronavirus and after coronavirus. So again, I just want to share some stats with you from January 1st to March 14th. I'm saying March 15th was D-Day for when everybody started going on lockdown. We were on a record-breaking pace. We had sold 187 homes, and the average sales price was $410,000. Since March 14th, surprisingly, we've actually had 34 home sales since as of Friday. So the sales are still there, but the average home price has now dropped almost $100,000 to $317,000 is our average sales price. What we're seeing is a lot of buyers are coming in that want to be out of apartments, or they're first-time buyers and they're ready to purchase. It's much easier to get loans and financing during this period. And we've also adjusted to sell houses online. A lot of buyers are at home picking out houses. So we're confident that we've really reached the right demographic, and we would like to go full speed ahead with this first phase out here in Heritage Hills. Brian, why don't you share a little bit here about where we stand?
So where we stand, again, going back to the overall neighborhood plan, this is identical or mostly identical to what was presented and approved through the Plan Commission, the council cycle earlier this year. And so really what we're looking at is the first phase, and that is 49 single family homes on carriage lanes, 24 twin homes on a carriage lane, and 6 of our Haven twins. And again, those are our senior targeted. And this is a good entry point into the neighborhood, a good cross-section of opportunities for people to be looking at alley-loaded, front-loaded housing options in single family, coupled with walkable streets, open space, and parks. The other components within this first phase, of course, is our stormwater management in the southwest corner. That will actually serve well beyond phase 1, but will be implemented as part of this first phase. And then an 1.5 acre pocket park, which we were in front of the Parks Commission last week to talk about and receive preliminary approval for a concept that would integrate play equipment, a shelter, seating, and an informal play area. This is a format that we've used repeatedly in neighborhoods. 2 case studies here, this being Grandview Commons on the east side of Madison. You can see after about 20 years worth of growth, what that starts to look like, where you have that setting of a park immediately adjacent to the single family, and then a variety of different housing products surrounding it. Another project on the west side of Madison in Linden Park, a little bit closer, folks want to go take a look at it. But again, the idea that these pocket parks form that first framework of open space in support of a variety of different houses. Overall, as we said, this was really patterned off of the GDP. So you see effectively implementation of exactly what we talked about, a variety of housing, a variety of open spaces, and creation of that first step into what will be a multi-phase project over the course of many years. In the interest of keeping things very tight, we've been really appreciated the opportunity to work closely with the staff and work through reports and comments in advance of tonight's meeting. And so we really wanted to just take a few seconds to talk about a couple elements just to touch on. All 3 of them really effectively are GDP components. And again, we put this document together, and thank you to Tracy and to Kevin in concert with their help to try to have a document that's easy to administer over time. So what you see is a general development plan that sets the framework is repeated in this document, but that was done intentionally. That way we can then offer in subsequent SIPs as amendments that follows the same menu. So we don't have to duplicate the document again and again and again. But the 3 comments we just wanted to touch on briefly, again, relating to the general development plan components. The first of which is the trail connection along 19. There's a request for the extension of the trail. And we do have a trail system. I'll be interior to the site on a portion. So if you can follow along from Division Street heading to Marshall, we do have a trail network that across the stormwater management and multifamily frontage to get to our kind of central access point and then head to the north. It would then follow east behind the Haven twin homes between the farm center mixed use and then along the stormwater management all the way over to the frontage on Schumacher. This was located intentionally for a couple of reasons. The first of which was to try to deliver a east-west corridor with as little grade as possible, recognizing that grade is something we're just gonna have to deal with throughout the region. But this allows this to avoid having to climb up or down the hill up to the intersection of Main and Schumacher if that's not your eventual destination. So if you're headed north on Schumacher or east at a future crossing point to Schumacher Farm Park, this allows this corridor to have as little grade as possible. The other aspect is the presence of some mapped wetlands. As we looked at this in closer detail in the last couple of weeks, this mapped wetland actually does extend into the right-of-way of 19, creating kind of a hurdle to get through in terms of being able to permit a crossing point there. That's certainly not to say that if the DOT comes along in the future is interested in revising Main Street within the right-of-way, that trail connection could be made. But within the project itself, logistics of getting a crossing at this point is going to be very difficult. The second component has to do with the farm center mixed use. And as we talked about in the adoption of the GDP and in subsequent discussions with village staff, this is something that's going to take some time to incubate. The Bryings are going to continue to own and operate the farmstead as agricultural use as well as the homestead. And that will be over a period of time that is not fixed. It really comes down to in the future, looking at the opportunity to develop this site, what we're asking for is that the language that was inserted into the GDP suffice. We recognize that this will have to go through an SIP process, review and approval with the village in the future, but that in the interim, it'll be operated as an agricultural use. And we added language into the GDP that notes our goal of reuse of some of the buildings if possible, but then drawing on them for architectural character in the event that it's not possible. And again, as we know in spades now, having gone through the seismic shift of the last month, predicting what the market's going to be in the future is sometimes iffy at best. We're all learning that definitely today, but we do ask that the flexibility be retained such that this can be evaluated as an SIP component in the future. The third element in the northwest corner of the site has to do with Division Street. Dan has been working diligently to look at how the alignment of Division Street can be designed to deflect it to the east onto the Heritage Hills property, such that we can work to preserve the sledding hill. There will be some impacts on some of the tree lines, but we'll be able to retain some of the tree line portions. But we think this tentative alignment will, again, allow for the preservation of the sledding hill and the preservation of that use to the west of Division Street at the same time as creating the north-south corridor that was desired. So again, a very quick presentation. We're happy to be back here tonight talking about phase one, as well as the overall general development plan. And the interest of keeping things as short as possible, be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, the first person that I'm going to call on is Brian Kleinmeyer. Do you have anything, Brian?
Yes, I appreciate Brian's update. That sounded all good. I just want to remind the Plan Commission that on the agenda tonight is the final plat and the SIP. So the Plan Commission is not going to be in a position to ask any questions about the GDP or provide any feedback on the GDP because it's not on the agenda. We need to limit our comments to the final plat and the SIP.
Okay, then I'm going to call on Ed Freer. Do you have any comments before the board or the commission members speak? Ed, you've got to come off of mute.
Yep, I can. Sorry for the delay. A quick question on the diagonal or the hypotenuse of that pocket park. Those residential units facing the park, is that their front door? And
Yes.
if it is, would there be a dedicated sidewalk between the housing and the park? That's all I have.
I can answer that if you'd like.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Yes, that will have a public sidewalk along the front of the houses, and that would be the requirement that they maintain those. It's set up identical to a sidewalk spacing as if you were fronting onto a street. We will have some bollard lights along there as well, and that will serve as the front door for those houses.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Jason Valerius.
So I will just repeat my comments that I've made in the past that I think this is a fantastic project. I think the mix of unit types and price points is exactly what the village needs. My comments are specific to the GDP. And so I guess I would defer back to Brian and to Kevin to clarify when and how we are handling the amendment to the GDP, and to let you guys can let me know if you want me to make my comments regarding the things that Brian Bunsen brought up regarding the GDP tonight.
Go ahead, Brian Kleinmeyer.
So to the extent that any of the comments that Brian Munson made or Jason that you're going to make apply to the phase one and the SIP, I certainly think that you can make your comments. To the extent that your comments relate to other portions of the GDP that do not apply to phase one, the Plan Commission and the Village Board have both acted on those. I think that there were conditional approvals that were made. So essentially, we can't comment on the GDP tonight And to the extent that it's necessary, and I'm not sure if it is, but and I'm not saying one way or the other, to the extent that we need further comments on the GDP, if they can't be handled at the staff level, then we'd have to put them back on the agenda for the Plan Commission and Village Board meetings.
Given that, I'm going to hold my comments as they relate to items not related to the current SIP.
Okay, thank you. Kent Strauss, any comments?
Like Jason, just a few things from the letter. Basically, my letter is kind of a laundry list of some little things and some, I guess, more significant things that may have been missing from during our engineering review. Number one is the boosted water system. At some point, they're going to need boosted water out here because the elevation of the land is such that the towers aren't high enough to adequately serve that. There's a number of areas like this around the village. In fact, the Lexington neighborhood or the Waunakee Heights neighborhood, Lexington Drive area have boosted water system. At some point, when they get into the future phases, they'll have to extend from there to serve this development. Right now, they are using the standard village water pressure system. So coming off Division Street, it's basically the standard pressure. And some of the areas of their development are higher than what we would want to see to be served, because at the approximate 960 above mean sea level elevation, the village has trouble serving those properties with adequate pressure. So we hear from residents that their pressures aren't great enough to serve, especially the second floor bathrooms and showers. So we have that out there to consider. That was in our letter. We are also doing Strand is doing a study for Waunakee Utilities on the best way to serve this with both boosted water and standard pressure, combination of both. So that's hopefully going to be done this week. That was kind of one of the bigger things. Another couple things include the drainage along Division Street. There just wasn't enough detail there for us, Meridian folks, on how that was going to fall in. It looks like there's a swale along Division Street that'll route water from the north to the south. I'd like to see contours in there to make sure it's all going to fit within the space that you've allotted for that. From a sanitary sewer standpoint, their service will flow to Pleasant Drive, I think, through April Lane connections, and eventually right there's an interceptor that runs along the creek. So from a sewer standpoint, I think they're all set in this first phase with gravity sewer, no issues with capacity problems. Finally, one thing we look for at this time are what we call LOEs, or lowest exposed elevations of buildings, and that's to ensure that water that's running off the site is not going to inundate any first floors or exposed levels, whether it's a walkout or something like that. So we'd be looking for that before, as a contingency of approval of the plat, to make sure we have those set properly. Other than that, most of the items I think were fairly minor. If the Meridian group doesn't think they're minor and want to talk about them, sure, we can do that. But at this point, those are the things that I wanted to talk about here.
Okay, Brian or Dan, do you guys want to respond to anything that Kent said at this point of his concerns?
I can just respond quickly. I mean, there's really not much to add to what Kent said. As far as the water pressure situation goes, we're still kind of, once we see the Strand report, we'll know how to react to that and how to deal with that, and then propose something to staff to be able to work through that solution. I've got a few ideas, but really need to get that report and talk with the Utility Commission to make some final recommendations for that. Lowest opening elevations, that's not a problem. And yes, we are working through the comments that Strand had provided and doing our due diligence on all those items and starting through the process of updating the plans to work with staff on the finalization of those comments.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, do you have any comments you want to make?
Nothing more than what's been added, other than the Parks Committee has recommended approval. They did work through some final changes today with regard to some trail width. We had a discussion today regarding the traffic impact analysis, and we'll be adding some details of that into the final developers agreement for phase 1 when that goes to the board, likely the first Monday in May.
Okay, thanks. All right, Plan Commission members, I'm just going to call on you one at a time. And if you have questions or comments in regards to what's been discussed tonight, this is your opportunity, and then we'll look for a motion at the end of this. So I will call on Brad Zeman.
Like the subdivision, drove a few of them here in the last month or two, and really appreciated the maturity picture that we saw as well, and how it'll grow together for years to grow here in the village of Waunakee. I like it.
Okay, thanks. Kristen Runge.
Likewise, I like the way that everything's being executed. The questions that were answered in the agenda packet were comprehensive. Thank you to Kevin and everyone else for their attention to detail. I will point out one thing though, as the person that wrote that report, that the median income numbers are off, and I will, if I don't say something, I will hear from all of the task force members who are following along at home. So I'll send you guys an updated bit of information about that, because our median income for all households in that at the time of that report was 93,000. For married coupled family households, it was 123,000, but those are our most well-to-do households. But again, no big deal about that. I'll send along the information to update you.
Thanks, Kristen. Then we've got Brian Wallace.
I do not have any comments, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Chris Thomas.
I may have missed this at the beginning, but what's the time frame for this? Like, when will the first houses be available?
Brian, can you answer that, Munson?
I can jump in. Our hopes is to start developing here. We got to get going. So July 1st, start grading, and then that would take us into starting houses about September, October, November time period, in which we then go out for sale soon after that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
Brian Malich.
I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the water scenario, the water pressure scenario, and then I'd love to hear more about the traffic impact study. But I guess realistically, as long as it's something that can be resolved to staff's satisfaction, I'm okay with it. I'm just a little sort of curious what the what ifs are or could be with respect to those two approaches, and how that impacts the village, I guess.
So I'll just maybe direct this to Kent, and this is my question that I had as well. With the water pressure issue that could be potentially here, will this have an impact on the surrounding subdivisions that are also being fed by that water? Could it cause issues with any of those?
Kent, maybe I could take the first shot at this, and then Kent can fill in. Chris and Brian, really the answer, we've had areas in Waunakee that borderline what we call the elevation 960. 960 is really the highest elevation where we feel comfortable to have adequate water pressure within the village. We can actually go higher than that in terms of elevation and have lower pressures and still meet the DNR requirements. But we set that as an internal policy that 960 will be our drop. That'll be the most, in terms of the adequate water pressure, we think that's the minimum that should be allowed within the village. And so we've asked them to either meet the 960 elevation or to provide an alternative. And there's different alternatives out there to have individualized boosted water systems, or figure out a way to get them on our boosted water system in order to provide that pressure. So I think there's solutions out there, but like Dan said, we're not going to know the results of that until we get through the strand study. Once we're through the strand study, I think we can resolve it at a staff level on the water system. Kent?
Yeah, Kevin is basically said what I agree with everything he said there. The study will look at the Lexington booster station, which is currently serving the Centennial Heights or the Waunakee Heights area, and also part of Northridge. That booster station that is on Lexington Drive has a capacity. Okay, so when that capacity is reached, it's basically not able to provide service beyond that. But there are other high zones within the village as you head north that would need some kind of boosted water. This development may be able to be served entirely on the boosted water system elevation, but it may lack the necessary fire flows for some of the commercial and mixed uses down in the south. So what our study is doing is looking at a combination of uses, both the low zone and, I'll say the low zone, but the standard zone, and also the boosted pressure system. So clearly they're going to need the boosted pressure zone. This first phase is very logical because it's adjacent to Division Street where they have access and they have some lots that are developable. I think we just got to work out which ones they're going to go for this time and how quickly they can get the boosted supply to the site to fortify some of these lots that might be on the high zone.
And Chris, you asked, let me follow up with one more comment that you asked about, will this development have impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods in terms of water pressure? And I would say it'll have minimal impact. It's really too different. The water flow is really different than the water pressure. So the water pressure is what we're talking about because of the elevation of the land that's going to be developed compared to our water towers. So it really shouldn't have any impact on the surrounding neighborhoods in terms of their water pressure.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Kevin, are you making tea in the background? For some reason, when you're off mute, it sounds like there's tea being made with a bell.
No, not making tea, but it might be my.
All right, so anyway, all right, so then we have Joe Zitzelberger. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian, were you completed? Brian Malich? With your comments?
Just traffic impact study, but it sounds like maybe that's just coming back in, so there's maybe not really anything to address yet.
I would say not at this point. I think we're working through it at a staff level, and we're going to include the necessary improvements that are identified in the traffic impact study. But really, the majority of the improvements that are necessary are really part of a much larger system improvement along Main Street that will really be the responsible of the DOT. There are some intermittent improvements that they'll be making along 19 at the intersections, at the intersection of Vision Street, the new intersection that they'll be adding in, which we're still waiting for DOT approval, and then at the intersection of Schumacher. So we'll identify the ones that are intermittent that need to be done as part of earlier phases, and then we'll have a plan in terms of how to revisit this for future phases and how they'll impact the development with respect to the TIA.
Okay, Brian, are you good? Thumbs up?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Joe Zitzelberger.
Brian pretty well covered what I was interested in. I do have a little bit of a concern approving all of these things with that much still outstanding, particularly the traffic study, but I know staff can handle that, so it's all good.
Okay, thank you. So Brian Kleinmeyer, would you give us what our two options are for, or Kevin for that matter, what our recommended motions are?
The two recommended motions are on page 5 of the, I believe it's page 5 of the packet. One of the motions relates to the final plat, which has to go to the village board after the plan commission. The other relates to the SIP, which is a zoning document that's approved at the plan commission level. So with respect to the final plat, the recommended motion is motion to recommend to the village board that it approve the final plat for the Heritage Hills development, subject to final approval by village engineer with modifications to meet staff comments to the satisfaction of the village engineer, and conditioned upon VH Heritage Hills LLC's acquisition of the land subject to the final plat. And just so that you're aware, that last condition was also part of the motions that we had when we had the prior approvals for this development related to the preliminary plat and the GDP and the annexation agreements. Do you want me to stop there after the one motion, Chris, or go on?
Let's do that one. Let's do that one first. And so those, if you need to read it, it would be on page 5 of your packet, or if you want to say the motion that Brian just read, I think that's fine too.
So moved.
Motion by Kristen Runge. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Brian Wallace. Then roll call vote, please, Tracy. Actually, yeah, Brian, do we have to do comments?
No, I mean, you guys have, you can certainly allow for further discussion if you'd like. You already have had some discussion. I think you could ask if you want any other further comments though.
Okay, so I'll ask if there's any other further comments. If you want to further comment, please put your hand up at this time. Brian Wallace.
Just to clarify then, for the final plat, is that for the entire final plat or just this phase? Will it come back again?
So it's just for phase one. What Veridian is proposing to do is each time they want to come forward with the subsequent phase, they'll be coming forward with that phase in the final plat and also that portion of the SIP. So your approval right now just relates to phase one.
Okay, perfect. And then as Brian Malik, you talked about the traffic impact study and stuff, will that come back at some point once that information is in hand?
Yeah, it would. Kevin, I don't know if you want to address that further, but yes, the traffic impact analysis will come back to you at some point for, at least for our informational standpoint.
Okay.
Correct. We would share it with you. We're identifying the improvements that are necessary as part of the development agreement. So they'll be identified in the developer agreement as part of the board approval.
Okay, any other comments from any other commission members? Please put your hand up if you have one. Okay, then we'll go to vote. Tracy?
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, then we'd look for the second motion. Brian, do you want to go over that one as well, please?
Sure. The second motion is motion to approve the specific implementation plan subject to final approval by village engineer with modifications to meet staff comments to the satisfaction of the village engineer and condition upon village board approval of the final plat and VH Heritage Hills LLC's acquisition of the land subject to the SIP. And again, two conditions to this motion. One is, again, the one that we've had for all of the other actions, and that relates to the acquisition of the land. And the other is the final plat does need to move on to the village board for approval. And my understanding is the plat is like final plat for phase one is likely to go at the same time that Kevin mentioned for the development agreement for phase one. So that's just the second condition.
Okay, do we have that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Kristen Runge. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
I think I heard Chris Thomas's voice first, so I'm going to say Chris Thomas with the second. Any other, if you have a comment right now, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Tracy, roll call vote, please.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you for the folks from Veridian.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time this evening.
You're welcome to stay on the meeting if you'd like to, if you're interested. So, all right, next thing we have is discuss and take action on the site plan approval, expansion, Octopi Brewing Company 1131 Unique Drive.
As an introduction, Chris, this is, and I think Isaac is now on the call. So this is an expansion at the Octopi Brewery, and Isaac can go into the details of the expansion. Really, our staff comments are very limited. The only comment we had was regarding the height of the building. We found as part of review that the height exceeds our limit by 8 inches. So they either have to, and I think they're proceeding tonight to have it approved by reducing the height by 8 inches, and they'll have the option of coming back at a later meeting if they want to get a conditional use to go the additional 8 inches. So with that, I would turn it over, okay with you, Chris, turn it over to Isaac for a quick introduction.
Yes, hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here. What we want to do is we want to do a tank farm expansion in the back of the building. It's basically a building to host 20 new tanks potentially down the line. That's our right now our bottleneck. We don't have enough tanks to keep up with production. So we want to just do this. We already got some of the work started. It's just the groundwork, and we want to get approval to continue the work. Hopefully, be done by June, July of this year.
Okay, Plan Commission members, any comments? I'm going to start with Brian Wallace this time.
I do not have any comments, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Kristen Runge,
No comments. Glad to hear they're doing well.
Joe Zitzelberger.
I'm just having sort of a thought that, was there a request in a previous expansion to put up a fence somewhere in the back? Was that part of a requirement? And if so, was it done?
Yeah, it was part of the last one. What we asked Kevin is if we could delay the fence until we get this done, because we're redoing all the back area right now as we speak. So once we're done with this, we plan to put the fence, because this should be the last project in the back that we're doing, hopefully for a while.
Okay, and is that fence piece documented anywhere here, or are we referring back to the previous documentation?
It should be part of the original one, the old one that we had.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's all I've got.
Kevin, do you want to make any comments on that yourself, or is that all good?
I would just add that we did give them an extension on the fence for logistics reasons during construction. It made more sense to get this phase done prior to put the fence up. So it was provided, he asked for an extension in writing. We provided an approval for the extension.
It makes good sense.
Okay, thank you. Brad Zeman.
No comments.
Okay, Brian Malich.
No, I don't think I have any.
Chris Thomas.
No comments.
Okay, which leaves me. So the only question I have, Kevin, when you introduced it, have we had a decision on what's going to happen with the height? Is it going to be they're coming back with it, or what are we approving exactly with that right now?
Right now, we're going forward with the 45 feet. So we're reducing it by 8 inches.
Okay. All right. That's the only question I had. So then we would look for, Brian, do we have a motion that's necessary with this? Or that's in our packet? I have to pull up the packet on the side of the screen, so.
Yeah, it's on page 86 of your packet. Very straightforward. Motion to approve subject to the applicant reducing the building height to 45 feet.
Okay, do we have that? Motion by Joe Zitzelberger. Do we have a second?
Second by Zeman.
Second by Brad Zeman. Okay, if you have any other comments, please raise your hand. Seeing none, roll call vote, please, Tracy.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Isaac.
Thank you so much, everybody. Stay
And
safe.
I think that, let me pull up I think we're looking for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So was that Chris Thomas with the motion to adjourn? Yes, and a second by Kristen Runge. Tracy, roll call vote, please.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Yes.
Kristen Runge. Kristen?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was still on mute.
Brad Zeman,
Yes.
Brian Malish,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Brian Wallace.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn what?
Thanks, everybody. Have a safe evening. And
Good night.
thank you for everything.
Stay well. Well done. Good meeting.
Good night.
Thank you.